Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. I'm your host, Dave Vance. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Our special guest this evening is Teena Hedrick, State Senate candidate for District 12, running against incumbent establishment, let me correct that, establishment incumbent Ken Yeager. I'm still having eye vision issues, okay? So she'll be joining us in just a few minutes. But first, if you have an announcement from a conservative organization that you would like to broadcast on this show, please send information to tninformer.tv@gmail.com the Friday before the show. If you want our state to stand up to federal overreach, the best way to do that is support the nullification process bill sponsored by Senator Bowling and Representative Halsey that they intend to bring back next session. Visit tncss.weebly.com/call to action, sign the petition, and follow the instructions on the link. Our state senators and reps need to know that we want this legislation passed when they return in January. Now is also the time to get candidates for state office on record as well. DC will never fix DC, only the state can fix DC, and we must demand that our state reps stand up to DC and uphold their oath to the U.S. and Tennessee Constitution. The Maury County Reagan Day event will be Friday, June 14th, 6 p.m. at Puckett's Restaurant in Columbia, Tennessee. Guests include Todd Starnes, Representative Andy Ogles, Representative Tim Burchett, and Tony Lauren. Tickets are $100. Visit murraytngop.com for more details. Before I bring on our guest, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about the state primaries, especially the state Senate races, to remind you of a few things. If you follow state politics, you know that our Senate is the biggest problem when it comes to getting good constitutional legislation passed. I followed state politics for the last 15 years, and certain names come up over and over again as rhinos or yes men for the so-called leadership, which would be Lee, McNally, or the Chamber of Commerce, Cameron Sexton in the House, of course. Some of the common names that I hear all the time that come up over and over and have come up over and over the years are Senator Hale, Senator Gardenhire, Senator Lundberg, and Senator Yeager. Stevens is also mentioned. He's not someone that I've ever heard described as a conservative fighter, despite what his mailers say. And our district could do a whole lot better. He also has some very bad votes on different topics, which we'll talk about later. The good thing is that this year, all of these senators, and as well as illegal-loving Senator Frank Nicely, have primary challengers. We have the opportunity to replace some top rhinos from the Senate herd. Now, I want to remind you of a few things. A lot's going on in the last 4 years. During COVID, we had our governor tell people that, your job is non-essential. And they're basically telling you, you don't have the right to provide for your family. And he got away with that. The bill that they were using, the emergency legislation they were using, was never designed for a scamdemic or a pandemic for that matter. Happened to be written by Randy McNally, by the way back in the early 2000s. So we had that happen. We've had our state give money, millions of dollars to the Titans, millions of dollars to Ford, and we've had them do some other things that you should not have to worry about happening in a conservative state with a Republican supermajority and a Republican governor, and we've had this for years now. Things have happened that should not have happened. If you remember a few years back, the story, I guess you could say, was kind of broke by Matt Walsh, a blogger on the Daily Wire, when he announced that Vanderbilt was heavily involved in doing this transitioning, these transgender kids, the surgeries, and giving puberty blockers to these young children. And so that story broke in 2022. Now, in 2021, there was legislation passed in our state. It was sponsored by Senator Hale, and actually Senator Stevens was a co-sponsor. And this legislation was passed. Every Republican in the House every Republican in the Senate voted for it. And I think pretty much every Republican in the House. It actually was a party line vote. Most of the Democrats voted against it. Here's the thing about this bill. And first I'm going to play just a little bit of of audio of Senator Hale explaining what this puberty blocker bill did just a little bit, then I'll fill you in with some more details. So if we go ahead and play the tape, this is Senator Hale in 2021.
Move Senate Bill 126 on third and final consideration with the purpose of bringing up the amendment that makes the bill. Any hormone treatment of gender dysphoria of children prior to puberty. What we're doing here is the current practice of medicine indicates that hormone treatment for gender dysphoria is not starting until after puberty begins. So this amendment simply ensures that this remains the case. This means anyone currently in Tanner 1 state which has not entered puberty. This just codifies what the medical folks say is already the standard of practice.
Okay. So, I've got the bill up there. You probably can't read it, but I'm going to read it for you here in a second. When he said what the medical community is already doing, he was referring to Vanderbilt, among others. And so let me clarify a few things here for you. Now, this is Public Chapter 460, which has since been repealed, okay? Senate Bill 126, all right? And as used in this section, this is under Section 1. I'm just going to read kind of the descriptions here, the definitions. Healthcare prescriber means an individual licensed under the title and authorized to prescribe medications. Minor means a person who is less than 18 years old of age. And pre-pubertorial minor means a minor in Tanner Stage 1 development. Now, most of you probably don't know what Tanner Stage 1 development is. I sure didn't until I looked it up. Basically, Tanner Stage 1 development is from age 1 to age 8. B, standard medical practice does not involve prescribing hormone treatment for gender dysphoric or gender incongruent pre-pubertorial minors, except as provided in subsection C. A healthcare prescriber shall not prescribe a course of treatment that involves hormone treatment for gender dysphoric or gender incongruent pre-pubertorial minors. A healthcare prescriber may prescribe a course of treatment that involves hormone treatments for pre-pubertorial minors for diagnosis of growth deficiencies or other diagnoses unrelated to gender dysphoria or gender incongruency. In Section 2, this act takes effect upon becoming law, the public welfare requiring it. Now, let me explain what I just told you. They passed a law in 2021, sponsored by Farrell Hale, co-sponsored by Senator Stevens and unbelievably by Senator Pody, that said that you can't prescribe anything for, you can't do this for kids from 1 to 8, which is great. We shouldn't be doing it for kids. We shouldn't be doing it for any minor, okay? So, but what that also meant when they passed this bill was from 9 to 17, you could still do it. Why would you want any minor between the age of from birth to 18 to be able to take puberty blockers, to be able to transition from one sex to another? That makes no sense. That's perverse and sick. I don't understand how a super majority of Republicans thought this was a good idea. Now, I suspect that the Democrats voted against it because it only included age, or it didn't allow you to do it for ages 1 through 8. That would be my guess is why the Democrats voted against it. But the Republicans that passed this should have realized, hey, wait a minute. We're stopping it for 1 to 8, which is great. But do we want kids from 9 to 17 to be able to transition, to be able to be given puberty blockers, to have their sex changed? Is that a law we want on our books in Tennessee? Now, if you think that this didn't happen or if I'm exaggerating or misunderstanding something, remember in 2022 when Matt Walsh broke the story about Vanderbilt and about what was going on in Tennessee, interestingly enough, in 2023, first bill out of the chute because the legislature realized what they had done. I don't understand how they didn't already realize the obvious. I guess that was they were deferring to hell. Well, you should never trust in hell. I will tell you that right now. And they reversed it, and they made it illegal to give it to any minor, as it should be. But how does a supermajority of a government with a supermajority of Republicans pass this kind of garbage? So those are kind of the things that we have going on. That's what our supermajority has done for us. Thankfully, they fixed it, but they didn't fix it until it was brought up and until they were embarrassed. Now, my guess is a lot of people just deferred. Leadership said, hey, we wanted this passed. They probably didn't even read it. They were probably told something that wasn't accurate. Whatever the case, I don't believe the majority of it, but somebody should have caught this. And if you're a sponsor and a co-sponsor, you definitely should have caught this. So that's the kind of garbage we got going on in our state, and that's why we have a prime opportunity this year to get rid of some of these rhinos. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about our guest who is running against Ken Yeager. Teena Hedrick is a Christian conservative dedicated to protecting our constitutional rights. She would like the honor of being the voice of we the people. She's married with 2 children. She was born and raised in Roane County. She's a retired nurse practitioner and has been in the medical field for over 40 years. In her profession, she loved helping people. She's had leadership roles in the past, such as assistant manager at a radiologic technology department. She's also taught at Roane State Community College several years ago. She has an associate's degree in radiologic technology from Roane State Community College. She has a certificate for magnetic resonance imaging, Chattanooga State, a BSN for nursing at Lincoln Memorial University, and a master's in nursing. Has a master's as a nurse practitioner, and she's a family nurse practitioner currently. Hey, thank you for coming on. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing okay. Glad to have you here. I appreciate you running. A lot of years we don't have any challengers for some of our worst offenders up there in the state legislature, so I'm glad to see you running. What led you to decide to get in the race?
Well, 4 years ago, I would have told you were crazy if you told me that I was going to run for office. But when COVID hit, I just got to watching and seeing that things just didn't make a lot of sense. And we were losing a lot of our rights and nobody was standing up for us. During that time, I did work in primary care and worked through COVID. My stepfather was in the nursing home, and when they shut that down, my mother wasn't allowed to go feed him anymore. And he starved to death. They let her in about 2 weeks before he died. But it was too late. He didn't understand why she couldn't come. He had Parkinson's dementia. She tried to call him. He couldn't understand her. And I was just like, we're killing people to let people live. I mean, this goes against medical ethics, what we're doing here. And then, of course, the mandates came along. And one of my children was mandated. The other one was in college, and they were also requiring it in colleges. And I just felt like it came out way too quick, and it hadn't been studied. I thought we need to wait and see what's going to happen with this. And anyway, I contacted Mr. Yeager during that time. He was no help. As a matter of fact, he was on Facebook about every other week encouraging people to take the vaccine. And he also signed a letter with about 15 other senators encouraging and coercing people into taking it. So I saw I wasn't getting there with him, so I organized a march in town. I called a couple of the news stations, but of course they didn't come because they were, suppressing us at that time, censoring our speech. But I did have about 50 people come out and protest with me. And I thought, well, not a lot came out of it, but we did maybe make a point. So I thought I'll go to a Republican meeting and see what's going on there. Maybe somebody's getting excited about this and is going to be doing something about it. Went there's about 5 people. Nothing going on there either. So I organized another march, and I also attended a couple in Oak Ridge. But my son did get his religious exemption accepted on the very last day that he was going to lose his job. Oh, wow. But Mr. Yeager did vote against religious exemptions being accepted in the workplace.
Wow.
And I know that at the plants, as they call them, out at Oak Ridge, a lot of people lost their jobs. They were brought back, but they still do not have their seniority. Their seniority was lost. It has not been given back to them to this day.
Wow. How long were they out? How long did they keep them out?
Probably, I think it was a few months. It wasn't a year or anything like that. It was a few months. But some people have been there for a very long time, maybe not that far from retirement, and they lost their seniority.
Not to mention lost wages during that time.
Yeah. hmm Yeah, they lost everything. It was like basically like they were starting all over. And from what I understand, they don't get promotions either. This is what I've been told by certain people out there.
You know, there was a bill this session brought up by Senator Pody, 0574, Senate Bill 0574, and it didn't get out of committee. I think it was State and Local Government Committee, and my Senator Stevens is on there. He voted against it, and your Senator Yeager, if I recall correctly, just didn't bother to vote on that bill. Now, that bill was, hey, look, you know, in the event of some sort of emergency, if your occupation is a legal occupation, then nobody's going to direct you and tell you that you're non-essential and that you can't work and support your family.
Right.
And you know, I did email my senator about that, asked him why he voted against it. And he felt like, well, he didn't agree with the non-essential, but he felt like that they had addressed some of the issues and that they had a little more control now. And the only thing I could find, and there may be something else, but number one, they didn't pass this bill. They didn't pass the obvious bill that would fix a problem. The only thing I saw was they reduced the time that a governor's emergency order is in effect from 60 days to 45. I don't think that's going to help a lot of people if you're told that you can't work for 45 days. I don't think most people are in a position to, okay, I can do without a paycheck for 45 days. And oh, by the way, you know, these guys all take an oath to the Tennessee Constitution as well as the U.S. Constitution, and the Tennessee Constitution has a Declaration of Rights right up front.
Yes.
And they just ignored it. They just ignored it then, and they ignore it over and over on a daily basis. And I think that's one of the big problems we have.
I think that they just do not protect people. I sometimes just feel like that we're just not their main priority, and they're not in touch with the real world. Like you said, most people can't afford 45 days, and especially this day and time, they may not can afford 2 weeks being without a paycheck.
Yeah.
And it's just totally wrong what all happened during that time. And I did leave out the most important part of why I'm running, is I did feel led to do this by the good Lord, or I would not be doing this if I didn't think that's what I was supposed to be doing. And I did want to add that. But I do feel that there needs to be someone in there that has our back. Just like with the puberty blocker thing, how long did it last before they changed the law? How many kids were damaged?
Right.
And during
It went at least a year and a half. I don't remember the exact date. I don't know if it was passed during a special session in 21, because I know they had 3 special sessions in 20. I don't know if it has a date on here. Okay, I don't see the date on this. I don't know if it was a special session or if it was during the session, the regular session in 21. So it could have been probably at least a year and a half, 2 years. And remember, they said that basically they were legitimizing what the medical community, but they meant Vanderbilt, what they were already doing. And this didn't get repealed until it got exposed, and then it got repealed first thing in 23. You know, because the word was out, the state had been embarrassed, and they realized, oh wow, okay, yeah, we didn't allow them to do this to kids from 1 to 8, but we allowed them to do it from 9 to 17, which is still wrong. So that's pretty pathetic that nobody caught that and put up a fight, and either just took Hale's word or just did what leadership told them, or I really believe a lot of them just didn't look at it. I think they just went along with it. So,
well, you know, in our profession, we're supposed to do no harm, which I think that went out the window during COVID and also during that. I mean,
yeah.
the puberty blockers, they cause osteoporosis. They cause long-lasting effects. And if you start that when you're a kid, you're going to have brittle bone disease by the time you're 40.
Wow.
I mean, the health effects, they're not looking down the line. They're looking at immediate gratification. I just don't think that anybody studies anymore. or we're not getting good studies.
How long would it take for a kid at 9 years old taking puberty blockers before that would cause permanent problems?
It could be a year, it could be shorter. Of course, during that time, they're growing,
Right.
and they're needing a lot of calcium for their bones. And what that's doing, especially the Lupron, they call it, the one that blocks the testosterone,
Mm-hmm.
and is the worst one that causes the osteoporosis. I know that I had to take it when I had some infertility issues and had endometriosis, and they actually put me in menopause for 6 months, and I took Lupron for only 6 months. Now, I'm not going to say that that's what caused it, but down the line, I do have osteopenia in my hips, and that could have been a contributing factor to it, but it does cause osteoporosis on a long-term basis, which they're going to be on it the rest of their life.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned too that the situation with your father during that time. I mean, and we've all heard about those kind of things. You know, you couldn't even go in to be with somebody, and you knew they were passing, and that's inhuman. That
Yes.
is in no way, shape, or form constitutional. That's not something that should have happened in our country, and it's certainly not something that should have happened in our state. And you know what? Bill Lee owns that, and everybody in that House and Senate that went along with it owns it. And now we got people that wouldn't even let the bill get out of committee to fix that kind of stuff in terms of, well, I may have meshed those two subjects there. I'm thinking about the jobs that are non-essential, but I'm not
Right.
sure of what came out. I think they did address, or a bill was brought forth to make sure that those kind of things didn't happen. I'm not sure of the status on that bill. I wish I'd looked that one up, but we'll definitely follow up with that later if we can find the information. So what kind of response are you getting from everybody?
I've got a very positive response. A lot of people have been touched in some way by what happened. And I think that people are finally realizing we lost our rights during that time, and a lot of them we still haven't gotten back. I mean, some places are still pushing the vaccine. As a matter of fact, nursing homes were still requiring it up till about a month ago. My daughter had to go to Florida for her clinicals for grad school because she couldn't go to a nursing home because they wouldn't accept a religious exemption from a student.
Here in Tennessee.
Here in Tennessee. Yes, sir. But they have since, I think in the past month, they have done away with the mandates in the nursing home, but it's just been this year that that has happened.
An election year, imagine that.
Yeah, and they're still pushing the vaccines for children.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, and the vaccine doesn't work. I mean, I think everybody should have figured that out by now. If you're getting COVID 6 times after you've had about 5 boosters, it's a pretty good idea.
Have
They
you
say
noticed?
don't go with correlation, but I kind of have to.
Oh yeah. Well, now have you been on the state website? I haven't looked for this specifically. Are they still pushing it on the state website? I suspect they are, especially since they have the One Health garbage on there. I suspect that they are.
I think it is still on the vaccine roster for kids, is what I understand. And also, I have seen commercials. I haven't seen it maybe in the past few weeks, but a certain news channel for one of the children's hospitals was still talking about getting the COVID vaccine for children.
Okay.
And I just wanted to scream at the TV every time that comes on. Don't do it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just, but I have had a great response, and I have heard a lot of the stories like what you were talking about. I have people tell me that their parent did die without them, that they died alone in the hospital, or they had someone that had side effects after the vaccine, or even someone that passed away.
Yep.
I just felt like that nobody had our back during that time.
No.
And matter of fact, the picture that you had of me when I was holding up the sign, I went up to the Capitol by myself that day. There was a small group having a protest there against the vaccines, the one there, Freedom Over Tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
They're protesting the COVID vaccine. And when the little hallway that they walk through there, I was standing up there with a sign, and you wouldn't believe how many of the senators and the legislators were giving me a thumb down when I was holding that sign and about the vaccine mandates.
Wow.
Yeah, that was probably in 2021, I think, when I was there. But, I just felt a burning inside of me that I needed to do something. And I think everybody at this point in time, the way our country's going, needs to stand up and step out. Now's not the time to be complacent. We've got to vote and get out and try to get some of these rhinos out of office that are continually voting for bad bills.
Yep.
And we need someone to stand up for we the people.
Yeah. Well, you're already hearing about this whole bird flu garbage, and of course it's an election season, so the Democrats would love an excuse to shut down the polls and do anything they can to scare people from doing anything other than maybe mailing a ballot. I don't have a whole lot of confidence that we've certainly nationally fixed our voting issues, but we've got these same people in the House, and if we can't get rid of them before then, but who knows what's coming down the pike. And the next time there is an emergency declared, whether it's legit or not or government created, I mean, they've already shown what they'll do. They have already shown they cannot be trusted with power. They've already shown they have no respect for the Constitution, period. I mean, it means absolutely nothing to the vast majority of them. Now, we do have about 30 or 40 in the House that are pretty good, and some others who can be brought along, but the Senate's pathetic. Out of 27 Republican senators, we have 5 to 7 that are good and or decent. The rest are yes men, and you cannot trust them, bottom line. They've proven they can't be trusted. So I do have a question. Is there any specific legislation that you have in mind if you're elected?
Well, term limits for Senate and a House in Tennessee, I think is a good thing. I think they've already tried it, but I'll try it again because I think that's part of what's wrong. Some of these people have just been in there way too long, and then we just got the good old boy situation going on. And also, I would like to look at some of the small businesses. I know that they had a hard time during COVID, and I feel like they're taxed to death. And I think there should be some way. Sorry, my husband, he doesn't remember I'm on a podcast. Sorry. But and also, I would also like to look in the mental health situation. We closed a lot of our mental health hospitals, and I think that has a lot to do with our homeless population and what we have going on with the drug problem that we have right now. And of course, I think the sovereign state bill needs to be brought back. I would be all about voting for that because I know that if they're not going to protect our border down there, we need to be protecting Tennessee borders.
Yeah. All right, so you're talking about the nullification bill that I talked about on the opening?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and
Yes.
that will be brought back. It is supposed to be in special session sometime this summer, but my understanding is there's not going to be anything in special session at least until after the August primary. In any event, whether it's heard in special session or not, as I understand it, the sponsors intend to bring it back next session, and they would have to refile anyway because it's a new legislature, so they would have to refile the bill either way. But that's why everybody's got to basically insist on getting that bill, in my opinion.
Right. I think that's a big problem is we just receive too much money from the federal government and we stay under their thumb.
Absolutely.
And especially with education, and it's in a mess. I don't even know where to begin on that, but I do think it needs to go back to the counties and get out from under the federal control.
Well, why don't we do this? I've got your issues from your website, and we'll just go down the line, and you can talk about them and let you fill in the blanks. So the first one you've got listed is First Amendment. So just tell us your concerns on that.
Well, like I said, during COVID, we were censored. Facebook, of course, they still censor us on everything. I think they still censor me. But our voices just were not heard at all. Just like I said, I would call the news stations and they would just squelch me. They wouldn't even listen to me. I think that during that time, and we still are being censored by our government. And truly believe that's just very important for us as a nation.
Well, okay, so at state level, I mean, there's really not a lot you can do about a private
Right.
entity that censors you, but at the state level, what are your First Amendment concerns at the state level?
Well, I, another thing, I think at the state level, we were probably also censored during COVID. I think that they didn't want us to really talk about it. And I think that there could be some legislation passed in that way. I would probably have to get with someone on that and see exactly what we could come up with. But I do feel that there should be some way that we should have more freedom in our speech, especially with health, and like with the puberty blockers and all that. I just think we don't have enough information about it, or they're not making informed decisions
Right.
in the sense.
Well, if I remember right, you couldn't go up there. I mean, the legislature was still in session, but it was not wide open to the public, if I remember correctly.
I think it didn't let people in there for a while on
Yeah,
some.
so that's in my opinion a First Amendment issue, because you should be able to go and
Oh
you're
yeah,
supposed to be able to instruct your legislator, and of course they have these committee meetings. I guarantee you, in those committee meetings, all the lobbyists were still there. I guarantee you the lobbyists weren't kept out.
right. Oh yeah, they weren't kept out. And also, I just lost my train of thought there. But also, we need to try our best. Another thing is on education. I would like kind of skip to that right now because
Okay.
about the parents, and if you want to read that one. I know that here in Roane County that we are having a lot of problem with pornographic books in our schools. And it seems like we're having a real problem trying to get those out. And I think there needs to be a better process of how this is being handled. And apparently we're able to get them out, but they're coming in as fast as we're getting them out. For some reason, we're not vetting them before we get them in. They like order a bunch of books and they get extra books besides the ones they order. And I'm not really, I think they're putting them in maybe without vetting them.
Are you talking about in the school libraries, or are you talking about just
Yeah,
in the
in the school
schools?
library. In the school libraries, yes.
Okay.
And yeah, and there is rule, like laws, but they're not following the laws. If you knowingly provide pornographic material to a student or to an under 18, it's against the law.
Right.
But nobody's enforcing those either.
Yeah. And Tennessee's got a problem with
Take
that.
all the laws.
We have a problem with that. We pass a lot of laws that have no teeth, because that law was passed last year, and it's not being enforced because, as I understand it, your sheriff's not going to go down to the school and arrest anybody, and your schools are not necessarily, or your school boards are not necessarily going to enforce this, and it's just hard to get anybody to do anything. And I was told by, I've heard this more than one place, that, oh, well, because of the Miller test, which is a test set up by the Supreme Court years ago, that, their method for determining whether or not something is obscene or not, that, you really would have to take this to trial. And that's ridiculous, that we can't just pass a law in Tennessee and define what obscenity is, define what you can't show kids at a certain age on school grounds. And it's ridiculous that we are still fighting that, just like we still can't get the CRT out. We can't get all the other garbage out. We can't even get the pride flags banned.
Well, if you can't read it out loud at the school board, I think that ought to be a pretty good sign for them.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the pride flag. We can't have the Christian flag, but we sure can have the pride flag in there. And that was a no vote by how many?
Well, and I think basically what they didn't have enough people voting. Several people walked out. I haven't heard any good excuse for that. I've heard excuses that are not legitimate, but I haven't heard any good excuse for not. Because I think the bill was intended to say, okay, look, you're not going to have anything on grounds but the U.S. flag and the state flag. And I don't see a problem with that.
I agree. I totally agree. I think that's totally all we do need in the school right now.
Right.
And
Anything else on education?
I I think if we would clean up our schools, we probably wouldn't need school vouchers or need anything like that available for students. I think we need to quit putting Band-Aids on stuff and get to the root of the problem.
Yeah. Hold the locals county accountable. And it's not just, I understand we have school boards, but we have state laws. Because, I've gone in over the years as a parent and as, even though my kids are grown, I've talked to different school officials about different issues that I find. And, oh, well, the answer is always the state. Well, it's the state. Well, the state does have the authority to do some things, but they don't seem to want to enforce anything. And like you said, instead of addressing the problem, I think a big driving force behind this whole voucher thing is, all right, we don't want to do the hard work of fixing these schools and holding people accountable. I think that's the big thing, is holding people accountable. They don't want to really do that. So we'll just put some money somewhere else, and maybe at least some kids will get a decent education.
Right.
So that just seems to be the what they're trying to do.
They just need to put the kids first.
Yeah, yeah. Second Amendment.
Yes.
Or can you, in your mind, justify any infringement? And what would you define as an infringement?
As an infringement, well, there's one law I think they have about the long guns, that you can't even have them on your own property. And I think that's an infringement on our Second Amendment rights. It's not like that in every state, but I think it is in the state of Tennessee. And also about the law of not having a gun in a bar or a place established like that. What if they're robbed and they can't protect themselves?
No, I think they did pass that. I mean, you can't go armed if you're going into if you're just a bar, okay? But if you're going into a bar and a restaurant, as long as you're not drinking, you can go in there and you can order a meal. But you can't drink if you're armed.
Right.
So, and to the long gun, the deal is that in Tennessee, I mean, you can have it on your property. I know there's, and you can have guns on your property, but if you read the way the law is written, it's very restrictive, and technically, depending on where you were, you could have problems. But the deal is, there's 30 some other states that allow you, if you want to carry a long gun, to carry a long gun. Okay.
Right.
Now, I have no desire to carry around a long gun at this point in time, but if I should have the right to, if I want to. Now,
Correct.
There's all the 4 states that touch Tennessee, you can do it. And the only other states that you can't carry a long gun in are, I think it's New York, New Jersey, Florida, and maybe Hawaii and Tennessee. And
right.
So that's ridiculous that you can't carry a long gun.
I know, especially in Tennessee. I mean, you would think we would be the leader of the pack.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yes.
And of course, they told us they gave us constitutional carry, but they didn't, because it's still technically illegal to carry a weapon with the intent to go armed, although I don't know how you carry a weapon without the intent to go armed, but that's the way the law is written.
I know. If you're going to carry, you're intending to carry, but
Right.
doesn't mean you're intending to kill someone. You're just intending to protect yourself.
Right. And there's a whole lot of places that you can't carry under
Right.
Bill Lee's supposed constitutional carry.
Right.
So is it safe to say that are there any infringements that would be acceptable to you?
No, not that I can think of right off the bat. I would have to take it on a case-by-case notice, but there's nothing that comes to mind that I think there should be any infringement on our Second Amendment rights. It's a God-given right. I think that's just very important, especially in this day and time.
Yep.
With what we have going on. If we don't have our guns, that's our last mechanism of defense.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so you're pro-life?
Yes, sir.
You want to fill in on a little bit of that? Fill that in?
Yes, I do feel like that life begins at conception. I feel like that the good Lord, how can we hurt him the worst? by killing something that was made in his image. I I do not think that we should have like a heartbeat bill or anything. I think that it should be from conception. The only exception would be a ectopic pregnancy, which would be a medical emergency. But other than that, I do not know that we should have any exceptions. They can always induce people, and babies are surviving at a lot younger age, and they have a lot of technology now. And I am for at conception.
Okay. So what can we do at the state level on the issue of illegal immigration?
I'm totally against illegal immigration. I thought that we weren't a sanctuary state, uh, but now we seem to be. I thought when Washington called, and said that they were sending those 600 in, which I know they bust a lot more in. I've heard that they were busting them into Chattanooga a long time ago. I was wondering why we didn't have buses there just to turn them around and take them back to where they came from.
Absolutely.
You know, this is ridiculous what is going on. Um, our people should be our main priority, not illegal aliens. They're here illegally, and they should be treated as such. I think that part of it should be with the sovereign state law that you were talking about, that we do need to get that passed. And I think that would help us some with illegal immigration. That as long as we're under the federal government's thumb, I know there's not a lot they can do, but the money that they take from them, there's always strings attached. And I think we need to be protecting Tennessee borders if they're not going to protect the border down there.
Well, we could definitely not encourage them to come here, and I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but in 2022, now this is a year after Biden's been in office, a year after he opened the floodgates, here in Tennessee, our Senate, led by Shane Reeves, the sponsor of a bill to give professional licenses to illegal aliens. Now, the House sponsor was a Democrat, which should have been the first clue. There's something wrong with this bill, but it was passed in the Senate. Your senator voted for it. My senator voted for it. All the well-known rhinos voted for it. And then even in the House, I was surprised at some of the names that voted for it. But it passed, and it was in effect for 2 years until this past session. And fortunately, Kerry Roberts, now he didn't support it the first time, fortunately, and he was able to get that bill repealed. But think about it. Biden's in office.
Licenses in the meantime.
Well, I mean, why would you encourage people to come to Tennessee? Why would you want to cater to illegal aliens and give them professional licenses when the floodgates are open by the federal government, when a court, and a lot of this bill, and when they were passing it, they talked a lot about DACA, basically that category of deferred, let's see, what is it? Deferred action child arrivals. That was an Obama creation. And they talked about them a lot in the bill, but the bill did not apply just to them, especially with, Biden opening the gates. And the fact that they would do that, and think about it, how many times over the last couple of years has our state either sued or joined a suit against the federal government over illegal immigration? At the same time, our state legislature is passing legislation to reward illegal immigration, to reward illegal immigrants with professional licenses. But thanks to Kerry Roberts this past session, and he's not always right, but he was very right on this, and he got that bill through, and it got repealed. So that's a good thing.
Well, good. That's great. We don't have the infrastructure for that. We already having problems with our schools. We sure don't need to add to it by we're going to have to teach them English, going to have to hire extra people. We don't have we're struggling as it is.
Right.
I'm all for legal immigration, but illegal, no. We can't handle it. We just can't handle it. It's just paying for the health care, their food, their lodging, what all they're paying for. I can't even believe they're paying for all that. I mean, I can't even understand what their justification is of all this.
Right.
Because, they're here illegally. They should be deported.
And you may or may not have known this, but it's worth mentioning. And the reason I'm saying this is I want the audience to know these things too. This is the same group of legislators that in 2021 passed legislation giving a $7.2 or $3 million grant to Catholic charities. And Catholic charities, in addition to being the lead on the issue of refugee resettlement, which is separate from illegal immigration, they were very involved with bringing these illegals in and still are. Our state gave them $7.3 million in 2021. And remember too, all these different NGOs, our state has to license those NGOs.
Right.
And so it seems, on one hand, they complain about DC and the illegal immigration situation that the Biden administration has created. But on the other hand, they're doing things to facilitate it while they're complaining about it.
I think they're in hand with the ones in the federal government. I don't know if you heard of APAC. I wonder if they're having anything to do with our local government like they are with the federal government. And have you heard of that? With Thomas Massey, that he was talking about, that they have someone that it's like a lobbyist.
Okay, are we talking about, I know AFP, Americans for Prosperity, is certainly pro-illegal.
It's called APAC, and it has to do with the globalism.
Okay.
And they're very much encouraging the illegal immigration, and also some things, I think, with Israel and what's having to do over there with Gaza and everything. But I don't know if you saw that. The podcast is worth watching with Tucker Carlson and him, though. Okay. And I just wonder if some of ours are being influenced by some lobbyists at the same caliber, and while we're having some of these rules made like they are, and some of these laws that don't even make sense, they're saying one thing and doing another.
Yeah, well, I know the Chamber of Commerce has a lot of influence in our state. Mm-hmm. And I know that there are international immigration groups, and like I say, multiple ones that bring in, Catholic Charities is a big one. There is a Jewish one, I can't recall the name of it, and then there's another one that I think there's a Lutheran organization, but all of these NGOs are getting in on it. I mean, they're all getting in on it, and they don't seem to, either they don't know or they don't care. I tend to think a lot of them just don't care. There's too much of this going on across the world for it to just be accidental. I mean, it's not just in this country. They're bringing them all over. They're bringing them throughout Europe. I don't really care about Europe per se, but it's happening worldwide, so it's not accidental.
Right, and it's encroaching here. I mean, we've got Memphis that's blue, Nashville that's blue, Knoxville is at least half or most blue now. Yeah. Chattanooga's blue, and I've heard the Tri-Cities are about blue also. I mean, it's coming to the small areas. People didn't think it's going to come to small towns, but it is, and it already is. And, when they start getting the DAs in that are, liberals, that's when it's really going to change. And then it's going to be too late.
So what are some other topics and or ideas of what needs to be done different in Nashville?
Well, I do feel like that we need some, with the healthcare issues and the COVID issues, and like we talked about, parents should be able to decide their kids' healthcare. And I think that didn't Biden just come back with something about the puberty blockers, and that he was, I can't remember exactly how they said it.
I think he's trying to push it through health services, or I can't recall the actual, but I think he is pushing it. And I think our state, once again, I think is going to take him to court. On a lot of these things, I don't know why we take them to court. I don't know why don't we just, ignore them and not go along with it.
Right.
But
well, they're probably trying to change TennCare and things along those lines to try to pay for things like that. And I think that that's something that we may need to make some type of legislation before it even gets there, about not paying for puberty blockers or anything like that by the state.
Right.
At least, even I think for adults, we shouldn't be paying for it.
Right.
If that's something they want to do, they should have to pay for it on their own.
Well, I know he's trying to do change Title IX, at the school level, as far as to include the whole sexual orientation and the transgenders. I know that that's another push, and of course federal dollars are tied to that. That's one of the, and you've already said it, that this being wed to federal dollars is a big part of the problem, especially for education. And so that's one thing that they talked about early on in the session was not taking any more federal dollars for K through 12 education, which I think is a great idea. I think that's the first thing. So is that, it can be done. If you look at the Sycamore Institute, they did a study of that, and the Sycamore Institute also, you can see a budget analysis of a Tennessee state budget, which I've got a note on here in a second. But if I recall correctly, they said we could do it. But now people are afraid to, I think the state doesn't want okay, if they cut certain things that they've been taking from the federal government, then they're afraid that they'll have to cut those jobs. Well, a lot of those jobs are just, that's part of the funding is the job, but is it really needed? We don't, to me, we cannot afford to not stop taking. We got to stop taking it. As long as we're taking federal dollars, we're under the federal thumb. And I think that's one of the most important things we could do. So I'll just ask you, would you support ending federal funding for our K through 12 schools?
Yes, I would. I would think it needs to go back to the counties. I wholeheartedly agree with that. As long as we're in the thumb of federal government, we're going to have the CRT, we're going to have the puberty blocker thing, even, where the transgender thing in the bathrooms, that's the key to all of it, is not taking federal money. It always has strings attached.
Yeah, more like ropes and chains.
Legislation to stop that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go back to the states. And, that's pretty much how Trump talked, put it back to the states.
Absolutely. Now, here's one thing I wanted to mention, and I think we may have talked about this earlier before we got on air, but I was looking at the Tennessee state budget, and this year, and this is proposed, I don't know if this is what it will end up being, but proposed for this year is $56.2 billion. And the last year of the Haslam administration, and I'm no Haslam fan by any shape or form, but it was 37.5. And from the time Haslam started till the time Haslam left office, it went up about $7 billion over that 8 years. And it's still plenty of waste, don't get me wrong. But we've gone up almost $20 billion after 6 years of Bill Lee.
Right.
And so, if you got some ideas maybe of some other, would you agree that that's an insane increase, $20 billion in 6 years?
I know things have went up, but hopefully they've not gone up that much. With the climate change thing, I think that's another thing that's eating up a lot of money that doesn't need to be done. Right. The EV issue, that was a big blow up. How much money did Ford lose over that after we sponsored them?
Yeah. We gave them what I think, was it $9 billion? Was it $9 billion, I think, that we gave them?
Something like that, yeah.
And we gave a lot of money for the Titan Stadium.
Yeah. And are they wanting to build another stadium to get the Super Bowl here? Did I hear that? Or
I'm not sure on that one.
I know they were wanting to try to get the Super Bowl here.
Yeah.
So
I think maybe that's part of their justification for the one that they're building, but it's still not justified in my mind. You mentioned climate change. So that's another thing. We've pushed back on these kind of things. Yet, if you go to the Tennessee State website, we've got a climate action plan.
Oh my goodness.
We got a climate action plan. We have a One Health plan. The World Health Organization met last week. And if I recall correctly, our governor did send a letter over concerns of sovereignty. And kudos to him. I'm sure somebody had to explain it to him, but all the same, he sent the letter expressing concerns, I think him and the AG, about sovereignty issues and revolving around the IHR, the International Health Regulations, and the pandemic treaty they were working on. Yet we have a lot of the same things that were proposed or discussed there in One Health in Tennessee already. It's already on our state website. And I know One Health has been around, I think since about 2006, 2009, somewhere around there. And Tennessee has had a One Health element or department, whatever you want to call it, since about 2018. But once again, we're publicly pushing back on these things, as we should, but we have them already in our state. And a lot of those things, are globally oriented. They're not just, hey, here's how we're going to do something in Tennessee. It all involves CDC. It's got links back to the WHO. And if you read the One Health on our state website, it links you to documents from, like say, the WHO and other global organizations. So we're talking about the same thing. And One Health, the idea behind One Health is ultimately all living things are treated the same. I didn't say all people, all living things, that me and you are no more important than animals or bugs, and or the earth, or trees or whatever, ecosystems. And that's all that's already on our state website. And this is in a state with a Republican supermajority. Yet here we are pushing globalist garbage on our state website.
Seems like we're always a couple years behind on what we really need to do.
Yeah.
Just like again, go back to the sovereign state bill. I mean, that would help solve that right there also with the WHO and the WHO.
Absolutely.
Then want to declare a pandemic on us for any reason, or even a global crisis, a global warming crisis, where they could shut us down. That's what people don't understand. It's not just wanting to shut us down for a pandemic. They're wanting to shut us down if we're driving too much. I think where was it in what country? I think it was Germany. They can't drive on the weekends anymore. They can only drive during the week. They have banned them from driving on the weekends.
Wow.
I mean, it's coming here too. People think it can't happen. Well, it did happen 4 years ago. We didn't think something like that could happen.
Yeah.
And you need people that are going to be thinkers, not knee-jerk reactioners, and think through and stand behind we the people. Be for people first.
Yep, absolutely.
And I just think that we've got to have people that genuinely care about our state and about our people.
Well, I agree. I think we've got your website to put up there if we could.
Okay. Sorry, Mike. I've got dark in here. The sun went down. I'm going to turn it
No,
on.
I think we've got it to post there. So,
Okay.
So that's the website for everybody to go to, and I'm sure there's it's Facebook, but I'm sure that you can, there's the website on there, and I'm sure there's donate buttons on there somewhere.
There is on my website. There sure is.
So, any closing thoughts?
I just hope and pray, we need to all be praying is what we need to do for our state and for our country. We're really in a battle about good versus evil right now. And if we do not turn this around, we're going to be done. And I think this is a pivotal year. And I think we need to have a good Christian conservatives that are going to stand for what they believe in. And that's what we need in the state Senate.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thanks for coming on. Good luck to you. And I want to hopefully have you back as Senator Hedrick.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
You too. Take care. I want to thank you all for taking the time to watch our show tonight. Please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell, so you never miss a show. The Tennessee Informer is available to listen to as an audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, and other popular podcast platforms. You can find links to them on our website, TennesseeInformer.com. While you're there, take a moment to sign up for our weekly newsletter to stay up to date. Also, please follow us on Facebook and Twitter as well. Just search for @TNInformer. Share our show with your friends. Join us tomorrow night, June 11th, when our guest will be Kathy Harms with Tennessee Fair Elections to discuss election integrity and what you need to know for upcoming elections in Tennessee. Hope you'll join us. That's all for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.